We are absolutely seeing, as you say, Tom, the beginning of an emerging Trump doctrine. A lot of analysts and watchers have tried to liken this to a new Monroe Doctrine, referencing that spheres of influence concept that comes from the Monroe Doctrine. But the Monroe Doctrine was really about external influence in the Western Hemisphere. And what we're seeing right now is the Trump Doctrine is much more about what's going on in its neighborhood and willingness to take all action to deploy all levers, whether it's economic, like tariffs and sanctions, or whether it's political, like renaming the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, or whether obviously it's security and defensive. We heard just last night that the president is saying, well, he might consider strikes on Colombian drug factories and even on the neighbor to the south of Mexico. So the Trump doctrine is really, as I said from the very start of this administration, it is much more ambitious. It's much more activist, to take a legal term, than we saw during the first Trump administration. This is not your first America First isolationism. And, I have this piece coming out for GZero tomorrow, in which I essentially say he's walking with a heavy foot and he's carrying many, he's pulling many levers.
Paul, I just went to my browser and I typed in map of America, Google.
Okay.
Up comes Thank you, Google, for this brilliant map. And there it is, just west of Tampa, the Gulf of America.
There you go.
That's what it's called.
Exactly. So, Lindsay, what's your thoughts as to what's going on with President Trump and in putting an aircraft carrier down in the Caribbean? I mean, I'm going to Aruba in January. Am I going to be watching war games from the beach here?
Absolutely. Changing facts on the ground as we discuss it right now. Look, we have to, you can't ignore the facts that they have moved the largest, most advanced aircraft carrier into the Caribbean. They're reestablishing military bases in Puerto Rico. There have been dozens of strikes on alleged narco traffickers in and around the Caribbean and the East Pacific. This is really happening right now. But, the Trump administration is really looking for leverage here rather than, it's hard to imagine that the president, who holds himself up as a peacemaker above all else, that's the legacy he wants to see for himself, that he's really looking to dive in and commit strikes on land in Central and South America. But this is really a leverage play to see Maduro leave office, to see a favorable neighborhood where he doesn't have adversaries leading atop of those countries. And he's made very clear work of this with his back and forth with Colombian President Petro. And, this all started with just to the north with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And look how that turned out.
I mean, but Paul, I didn't realize. Paul, first of all, folks, Paul doesn't stay at the Four Seasons in Aruba. He's in some fancy shishi shack.
Yep.
Like where they got pina coladas with no umbrella. That's the way he rolls. I had no idea where your cottage is in Aruba.
Right there.
Is 21 miles.
Exactly.
I did not know that.
I'm not kidding. It's a little dicey there. Lindsay, one of the disappointments, I think, for President Trump on the geopolitical front so far in his second tenure has been the Ukraine and his relationship with Russia. Has he kind of washed his hands of Ukraine at this point?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we know that there were campaign suggestions, campaign promises saying that he was going to end the war in Ukraine on day one. He then gave himself some grace period of 6 months to end that conflict. We're well beyond that now. I mean, well beyond. We're just 10 months into the second Trump administration. And we've seen a lot of back and forth, including that pivotal meeting, which was really the high point of relations between Russia and the U.S. in Alaska, followed up with the U.S. voting with Russia at the UN on votes of Ukraine. The Trump administration is not ideological about how this war ends. It just wants to see that it's brought to an end. And in a sense, as a result of that, we see these sort of changes in policy. And right now, this moment, the U.S. is committing assets elsewhere, committing attention elsewhere. We have Mohammed bin Salman visiting the White House today. And these are all signals that it's Europe's turn to step up. We know that just in this week alone, Ukraine and France announced a deal to purchase fighter jets. That follows another deal with Sweden to purchase fighter jets. Who knows where this money is coming from? But for now, the U.S. is taking a step back and saying, Europe, this is existential for you. It's not existential for us.